Oh, hello. I was just taking a break from thinking about all of the injustices in the world to read up on a little bit of gardening, since it's almost the season for it, thankfully. But since you're here, I know that you know that Pride is a protest. But what does that actually mean? And it got me thinking about a revolutionary queer from the UK called Peter Tatchell. And I thought, well, what would Peter do? 1963 at Baptist Street, 4 pure souls taken. Vicious, tragic, devastating. A catastrophe caused by the worst misshapen views of vile racists. Then, noble MLK, although shaken, led non-violent resistance. Rejecting violence, he said, "No darkness for darkness. In the stillness, we congregate. Our light is the brightness, as our love drives out the heartless. No hate for hate, no matter what that takes." Then, on television, Peter Tatchell, although young, just 11, somehow sees this human rights battle from across the globe's distance, inspired by MLK's words spoken on passive resistance. The child's mind is awoken. The dynamite, although evil, had unintended effect, causing upheaval as it erupted violently. It interrupted silently the harsh judgment in UK society of the LGBT+. What Peter did next, defiantly, in part, won respect for all of us. A limitless source of moral responsibility, he's a citizen, but only of connected humanity. Fighting for innocence as a matter of course, his bravery is a tour de force. At the aspersion that gays deserve to be electroshocked for our so-called perversion, he talked on our behalf and was then hauled out. He knew dispersion would be through photographs, so his advocacy grew and grew. Held by the Stasi, the queer pioneer requested through fear homosexual liberation in East Germany, a nation with paragraph 175 enacted by Nazis, although perpetuated. How would communist youth learn the truth without Peter? That we could thrive when we were hated just for being alive. The candidate they weren't ready for. Standing as Labour and refusing to capitulate, despite Bermondsey's hate, or threats that he'd die, with newspapers printing lies, so they'd despise their gay neighbour on the streets and in public life. Peter's plea, on behalf of those with HIV and AIDS, cascades to 12,000, a marching epitaph by candlelight mouthing, a grief-stricken whispered plight that makes us sicken is your ignorance. So, we hold a summit to overcome that. A kiss-in was staged as part of outrage. Direct action to support those under arrest for the public crime of acting on same-sex attraction. A sublime street pantomime for the police, who now knew change was past time. In an act of, quite frankly, child abuse, Margaret Thatcher introduced Section 28, a law that induced queer people to hate themselves, or mistakenly think that they were someone else. Education reduced to default to straight. Queerness shadows secrets. But Peter's leaflet read, "It's okay to be gay." A public challenge in pursuit of equal marriage as the government set requests for fairness to mute. So, on the pavement, public vows between men and men, between women and women, for awareness but said with devotion, before and again the love they espouse, already an everyday notion. The unapologetic pledges had their first reading to legal recognition. They were proceeding in civic wedding, united with pride. But in Westminster Registry Office, marriage licenses were denied. Then, Off the back of this refusal, Peter proposed an Equal Rights Act for approval, some of which became enclosed in the 2010 Act. But then, in 1992, there was still so much more to do. Peter's descent on the age of consent had John majorly surprised. His motorised parade was ambushed as he hunched over head and hands, ironically bending over for a gay man, along with Sir Ian McKellen speaking with the then Prime Minister. An age of consent at 18 was finally seen. Then the bishops were outed, although the poet can't condone it. But it did make them stand up and be counted, and cease to condemn the LGBT plus matters, when before they wanted to say we were sinners. At the wedding of royals, William and Kate at the palace, he sat at the gate to ask, without malice, why their regal bond was legal, but queer pairs, equally fond, could not compare. The poet is just guessing, but down from heaven, Diana gave her blessing. Tatchell questioned if wealth is really common, if LGBT plus health was forgotten by the Queen and General Secretary, when conditions for the queer in the Commonwealth were adversity. So Kamalesh Sharma was the first to say that persecution and prosecution wasn't okay. That being said, it continues today. In fact, it's the majority of countries. The Queen did nothing to act. Peter's quest wasn't exclusive to the UK. His protests extend to injustice internationally, to those oppressed, like disrupting the ballet at Albert Hall as a demo for Romanian gays targeted by laws, or a citizen's arrest of Robert Mugabe, responsible for torture in Zimbabwe, a nervous departure to Moscow, speaking out against Chechnya, where anti-gay violence is deathly intense. So, the UK's silence while Tatchell spoke was a kind of violence, requiring uncloaked. Of course, it's never ethical to oppress humans under any criteria, or by assuming that they are inferior. But the looming danger of HIV, of AIDS, does not discriminate the shades of the atlas, legislation, or boundaries. Hard to practice safe sex without information. Yes, it's complex. But today, this is a disease spread by stigmatization and curbed by education. How can those measures embed where there's pressure to have a life unsaid? Like Uganda today with their anti-gay propaganda. Did the new King Charles have his say? He hasn't had the morals. Not yet anyway. The country's HIV clinics are empty. It hasn't gone away. A public health issue in his Commonwealth. To this day, Peter's persisting. I have to admit, I couldn't hate him. Some direct action I had to omit. This poem's already too long.